Space and the moon represent the ultimate high ground. And for some reason, we just walked away from it all. Well, we're not doing space shuttles anymore. We'll just give it to Russia. Anyone wants to go to space on anything has to go to Russia now, our former arch enemies. I've done a lot of work on my channel to try to show that space is misdescribed and that NASA has basically never told you a true story, at least in my lifetime.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report. Thanks so much for tuning in. No better sponsor to plug in this video than Virtual Shield. Now, why are VPNs important? It's simple. VPNs are powerful and extremely useful for well-informed citizens. That's why entire countries are working to ban them. Is the US next? Hopefully not. If we have a republic, your privacy is paramount. And right now you can take advantage of the Memorial Day special with an extra 35% off Virtual Shield. Be sure to use coupon code SGT Report _Memorial35 at checkout. Virtual Shield VPN is one of the easiest to use VPNs in the world and one of the fastest. And their no-log policy protects users from any data breaches. And in a world where the NSA continues to try to gather your data, Virtual Shield hides your IP address and encrypts your internet data so your online activity is out of sight of your internet service provider and other would-be snoopers. And regain control of your privacy with IdentiSafe. Virtual Shield's IdentiSafe blocks your webcam, microphone, securely deletes files, history, and more. So take advantage of the Memorial Day special with an extra 35% off all Virtual Shield plans. Use coupon code SGT Report _Memorial35 at checkout. Now, guys, I want to thank all of you again. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. It's a little bit outside my normal wheelhouse, but you know how interested I am in the lies they tell us, and there are so many. And I think one of the best examples of that is the indoctrination of the space programs, the stuff shoved down our throats since we were little kids, the Apollo missions, NASA. Have they ever told us the truth about anything? We've covered some of this in the past with my guest, Crrow 777. You can check him out on YouTube at that name, or his radio show, crow777radio.com. Crrow, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Well, I appreciate it. And, let's just start first by talking about censorship. You told me something here right before I hit record that I hadn't heard. I am familiar with that channel, Secure Team 10. He's sort of the UFO guy, probably the biggest UFO channel on YouTube. And I post some of his stuff over at my site, thephaser.com, occasionally. And you just told me something about him being censored, which kind of blew me away.
Yeah, it is Secure Team 10. He requested a couple of my telescopic videos way back and ran them. But he's got, I think, something like 2 million followers, which tells you flat out YouTube has allowed his channel to flourish. And just about a week ago, they demonetized him. And then I think he posted a clip, and the excuse given by YouTube was that his thumbnails were misleading. I'm not even kidding. And, I don't really accept the alien narrative. I just don't. I think it's largely a Hollywood construct. And, Jason and I on Crrow 777 Radio, we did 12 hours of space fraud. This across 6 shows. I've handed you the links if you want to use them, so people can get an idea. But my point here is it almost seems like it's just random destabilization of everyone at this point, because if you got 2 million subs, you've been allowed to flourish. I think it's that simple. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I have actually made that point about that specific channel in the past, that because of the nature of the things he covers, he's not really throttled down by YouTube, and his subscriber base grew really quickly. But it's shocking to me to hear that he was just demonetized for no good reason. And you know what? YouTube uses such flimsy reasons for everything they do, and it's so arbitrary. It's so frustrating. And the bottom line is I think they're trying to demoralize all of us. And they're trying to prop up the dinosaur mainstream media. Those are the returns that are top returns now on YouTube. You want news? You get Fox News, CNN, MSNBC.
Well, those things are going to fall by the wayside as we get in here further. People are sick and tired of nonsense. And there's very few people out in the world, the thinking world, that are accepting these nonsensical narratives from the mainstream, which are clearly propaganda and programming at best. But from what I understand, Secure Team 10's viewer base raised hell, and he was reinstated. Now, this is similarly what happened to myself on my channel. When censorship came out into the light of day, into the open, in the fall of 2017, they took me out. We had just covered what I consider to be false event, and I guess I won't go much further. I don't want to get your channel in trouble, so I'll leave it at that. It was episode 76 or 77 on my channel. But we did that, and they took me out. They used a lunar wave video, actually, as the third strike, which is a bit ironic. But so many of my followers complained. About 3 weeks later, I got a copyright strike. And I'm all, how can I have a copyright strike? I don't have a channel. So I go log in, and there's like a channel there that's not quite mine, kind of mine, but kind of not mine. And I'm all, what's going on here? And I look at the strike, and it was a Higher Side Chats program that I'd done way back on Greg Carlwood's station, and his music that he had used was the copyright. It wasn't even my strike. So I'm all, this is beyond bizarre. I log in the next day, and lo and behold, there is my channel, looking normal as it was with 2 strikes. And so that was when this all came out in the open. But what people don't realize, and I'll be doing shows on this very soon, artificial intelligence and the new type of capitalism we're now moving into, which I call surveillance capitalism. Google is heading that. You've got to realize that there is no company in the world that has enough employees to monitor the amount of videos that YouTube monitors. This is all being done by AI. And it's just a bit baffling when you see someone with 2 million subs get pinged, because that's like a shot across. That's just a message to everyone, isn't it? It's like you said, they allowed him to flourish because of what he's covering. You know, gray aliens or, stealing people from the world or whatever the narrative is.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating about it is, and we saw this recently with a news report, that Google lost some, I don't remember what the figure was, $70 billion in market cap because of slowing advertising revenue, because of them demonetizing and taking away advertising from the alternative media. Their response was, well, that's less than 1% of our platform. And yet it dinged their earnings that badly. I think it was much more than 1% of their platform, or certainly that's where the views were. The views were coming to SGT Report. The views were coming to all of the alternative news media on YouTube. And the legacy media and Google, they can't allow that to stand, because we're winning the battle for the hearts and minds.
That's right.
And the spells are being broken. I think
That's
at the end of the day, Jeranism, I just watched a video and I posted it over at thephaser.com, guys, from Jeranism. That guy is really smart. I really do respect him. And he said exactly that. The spell is being broken.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Common sense will find itself in the course of normal human condition. It may take decades and decades, like most of my lifetime, but common sense is coming back. But you see, when you see the numbers of the amount of money they lost and they just snuff it off, I've got to point out that as we move into surveillance capitalism, which Google in this part of the world is the chief of, and actually, believe it or not, China is way ahead of us. And I could address that if you want me to. Most people don't believe it, but it's actually true. Data is king now. And the reason data is king is because it trains their AI, and AI is doing all this. And I told a story not too long ago, because I'm doing all this research for the artificial intelligence episode I'm about to do. They got into artificial intelligence and they started making benchmarks for what can machine learning do. Well, let's see if we can beat a guy at checkers. So at this point, humans are interacting with the AI, and they do beat relatively quickly a checkers master. So then they move on to chess, and I think most people can remember this. And at this point, human intervention, or humans are working with the AI, and eventually they meet, I think it was Garry Kasparov, if I remember correctly, the grandmaster of chess in the world, and they beat him. And almost everyone listening will probably remember Deep Blue from Jeopardy. All right, now at this point, we're hitting a crossroad. And this guy that says, sure, I'll play the AI and I'll beat him. I think he won like 74 games. I think at the time he may have won more game show money than had ever been won. I forget. But Deep Blue kicks his butt. Well, now they've got this gold standard for what will be the gold standard when AI can beat a person at this game. And the game is Go. It's an old Chinese game that's supposedly been around for about 3,000 years. Part of Go's thing is, like, if you sit down at a chessboard, and people can look this up online, there's so many moves that can go from the outset. In Go, that number is astronomical, but part of playing Go is the psyche of your opponent. So this is why it becomes the gold standard. So this is what happens. they finally realized that the human intervention with the AI is probably slowing it down, and they've been working like years to beat Go, and they can't do it. So they take humans out of the loop and they let the AI teach itself. And very quickly, they beat a master in Europe. And then not too long after that, they beat a grandmaster in China.
Right.
But here's the rub. Out of what happens, they see strategies that have never been seen before in 3,000 years of human playing of Go. And not only that, they can't deduce how the strategies were arrived at. So this is the thing, you're going to start to hear words like G Mafia, which is actually an acronym for the companies in this part of the world that are behind the AI. And that would be Google, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Facebook, and Apple. But the real power, believe it or not, and it's hard to swallow, is in China. There's 3 companies there that are light years ahead, we are told, with the AI that we invented over here, which, by the way, is going to be the force that drives surveillance capitalism. The 3 companies in China are Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. And by the way, China has already rolled out its social ratings. And for people who don't know what this is, they have a version of Facebook, and absolutely everything is on it. You go to a hospital, they're on it. The police, they're on it. Everybody's on it. And so if you are walking down the street and you stop to interact with a person who has a lower social rating than you, your social rating drops. And people may think, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is if you go for a loan, your APR just went up, or you may not be able to rent an apartment, or even your kid may not get into school. This is what's being rolled out in China first. It's a scary future with all this artificial intelligence coming, and we're doing it too. It's just that China has a crap load more data than we do. They have a massive internet with, and who knows how many Chinese people are on it, and it's got a firewall around it. But even if we in the West could get to their internet, not too many people can handle the Chinese characters. So what's in essence going on is China is doing mass total data collection of their internet and then coming out and scraping the internet the rest of the world uses. So they feed their AI way better than we do, apparently.
Yeah, and they're trying to roll out the social credit scores here too by monitoring our speech and curbing our speech. They're actually trying to mimic what China's doing. The social media giants are sort of mimicking what China's doing by disincentivizing certain types of speech in this country. And then they're overtly banning and censoring some people. I should read this email for you guys. I just got this from YouTube on May 27th at 7:35 a.m. Get this. Hi, SGT Report. As you may know, our community guidelines describe which content we allow and don't allow on YouTube. Your video, Vanishing Brass, was flagged to us for review. Upon review, we've determined that it violates our guidelines, and we've removed it from YouTube. The impact on your account. Please note that this removal has not resulted in a community guidelines strike or penalty on your account. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is they just took away my speech and flushed it down the toilet.
That's right.
Now they're being overtly Orwellian, and they're disincentivizing certain types of speech or certain types of reporting or investigative reporting about certain topics, in that case, a mass shooting. Look, the bottom line is, and you're right about Google, and I've been telling people, stop using Google's Chrome. It spies on you. Use the Brave browser instead. I'll put the link below, guys. The Brave browser won't spy on you. It's more than 2 times faster than Google's Chrome, and you can earn basic attention tokens. You can earn credits in crypto that you can use to tip the creators you like. So I think it's great. It's the Brave browser. It's a whole lot better choice than Google, but Google is Big Brother. And if this government doesn't do something, well, this government.
They're never gonna, because they are what basically all this data collection gives somebody is a time machine. And people may roll their eyes, but you can roll your eyes all you want. Go look up Wisdom of the Crowd or the Law of Large Numbers. Those are infantile versions of what AI gives them. They have gotten so good, and their AI is learning so quickly at trillions of processes in a microsecond. And I'm not even kidding. That's how quick it's learning. So human beings can't even deduce how the AI is coming up with You could have 10,000 years and you couldn't get through a trillion processes that it did in the blink of an eye. But what happened was this was all geared right around the time 9/11 happened. You see, in I think it's 98, I may be off by a year, Google incorporates. You know what their mission statement was back then? Don't
Don't
be
be
evil.
evil.
That's right. And so, I forget the name of the process
They've
that can happen.
changed that now, though. You realize
Yeah,
that, right?
I'm about to explain exactly why. I just got done through all this research. Check this out. So in our American so-called government, which is actually a corporation, there is a process that can happen where all laws are suspended and the master in chief, the president, gets all these extraordinary powers based on a crisis. That's what Google did with its "don't be evil" outlook on how that corporation would run. And here's why. All these VC venture capitalists had invested in them. They had the best search engine going by miles. All the data they collected was being put back into the tool so the end user had a better experience. That was in the don't be evil days. Now, as the dot-com bubble began to burst, the venture capitalists said, look, guys, we're not messing around. You better turn a profit here quick or you're going under. That's when they stood up and said, guess what? All the laws are out the window and the master in chief here is going to get extraordinary power. And they flipped the switch before the year 2000. Now, they started in on the AI. And at this point, they're now collecting the data at the expense of all the users. It's all geared now towards the advertiser. By the year 2002, the AI was running it all, completely automated system. So that's part of the backstory that I'll be covering.
Wow. Wow. What an interesting conversation. Well, why don't we make a left turn here and let's talk about NASA. I teased it at the beginning of the interview. Let me just share an article with you, Crrow, and audience, and then I want your take on it. This article is from space.com. It's dated September 14th, 2005. NASA to unveil plans to send 4 astronauts to the moon in 2018. Now stand by. I've got another one for you. This was posted 11 days ago at space.com. Will NASA's rush to land astronauts on the moon get us to Mars any faster? By going to the moon in 2024, we are, by definition, accelerating the Humans to Mars program, said an official at NASA. So in 2005 or 6, they were telling us they were going back to the moon in 2018, and now in 2018, they're saying, stand by, it'll be closer to 2024. And I would imagine in 2024, they'll probably tell us it's 2030.
Well, thanks for the comedy, man. I didn't know you were a comedian. No, I'm just kidding. But this is case in point for propaganda tied to kicking the can down the road, where you get told the same damn thing over and over and over, and the foundation of what you're being told is built on a lie. That's what's going on here. Yeah, we're going back to the moon in 2024. Let's take a common sense approach. Okay, let's just act like everything governments in the world tell us and all military endeavors that have been in the public eye. Let's just accept them at face value. So if we accept all that stuff, we know certainly. And by the way, I'm a former Marine. I was in during the first Gulf War. When you're in a military situation, it's always the high ground, isn't it? And that is epitomized in air dominance, right? So if you have an air force that can control the airways, you own the high ground, so to speak. Well, space and the moon represent the ultimate high ground. And for some reason, we just walked away from it all. Well, we're not doing space shuttles anymore. We'll just give it to Russia. Anyone wants to go to space on anything has to go to Russia now, our former arch enemies. Think back to the Reagan era when we needed the Star Wars space laser. That was the epitome of the idea of the high ground is king. But for some reason, what's it been? It's been more than 50 years since the first time we were lied to about a moon landing. It's been over 50 years. And for some reason, that high ground doesn't matter. And I've done a lot of work on my channel to try to show that space is misdescribed and that NASA has basically never told you a true story, at least in my lifetime.
And that's sort of what I was driving at the beginning of the interview with the tease about NASA, because look, I've interviewed Bart Sibrel several times. He created that documentary, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. I suggest people watch it because in that documentary, he shows NASA accidentally sent him, among piles and piles of reels he got under Freedom of Information, they accidentally sent him a reel of the astronauts pretending to be far, far away from the Earth when they were in near-Earth orbit. And this is while they were supposed to be approaching the moon. This is during one of the Apollo missions. And the footage is very, very telling. NASA really can't defend it. Bart Sibrel says we never went to the moon. And the more and more they kick the can down the road, look, if we went to the moon with 1968, 69, 70, 71, 72 technology, why didn't we go back to the moon with 2005 technology or current technology? And
well, we can't. is what they keep saying, right? So we could do, it's actually worse than this, because if you go back and look at the timeline we were handed in the late 60s, basically within the scope of about a year and a half, with no computers, basically, no modern engineering, just the things we had at the end of the 60s, they said, okay, here we are, we're building it now, we're going to put a dudes on the moon and bring them back safely, and then they tell us they did it. Well, here all this time forward, let's take Sir Richard Branson in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, that ridiculous spaceport thing that he built out there just off the 33rd parallel. Hint, hint, hint. Sir Richard Branson goes for 14 years doing this X Prize or whatever the heck the thing was called, where what they were telling the world they set out to do was for private people to make a vehicle, take it to the edge of space, let it fall back down and reuse that vehicle in something like 2 weeks. After 14 years, he has the nuggets to come out and say, well, space is hard. We can't do it right now. Well, the rub is that, first of all, his comment, space is hard, is lifted from the Apollo era. All right, that's when those words were first uttered. But how is it with all these new materials, all this new engineering, all our capability to model with computers and all the things we got going for us, we can't possibly even make it to the edge of space? And I'll tell you, I don't know how many people that might classify as religious are in your audience, but in almost every religion, big religion in the world, there is incorporated within the scriptures the idea that there is a firmament. That's what it's religiously called. Other people call it a dome. I call it a hard, fast barrier, and I maintain that no one has ever left our atmosphere. And I've done a heck of a lot of telescope work, and there's a heck of a lot of hours of podcast on my channel where I've tried to back up and demonstrate what we're talking. But can the average person put together, how is it? 68, they start doing it. 69, they pull it off. All these years forward, we can't even take a vehicle to the edge of space, drop it back, and reuse it. How is that possible?
Yeah, and I got another one for you from space.com. I mean, you want to talk about the construct that's been shoved down our throats our entire lives, right? And we don't have to get into flat Earth, but a globe in every classroom. NASA being some sort of gods among men who put men on the moon, right? It's shoved down our throats.
Right.
And in addition to that, they keep changing the story. Again, an article from space.com dated February 21st, 2019. Surprise, Earth's atmosphere extends far beyond the moon. I mean, they just keep changing the construct. And the construct was created back in 1583 or whatever it was, by Copernicus, who had close ties to the Vatican. And, he came up with the heliocentric model, and that's been shoved down our throats ever since. And look, I just find it frustrating because, and I want to give another shout out to Jeranism. I was listening to that same podcast, and he mentioned a whistleblower at NASA who I'd never heard of. His name is Thomas Barron. And Thomas Barron wrote a scathing 275-page report about the Apollo 1 fire that claimed the lives of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. And the 275-page report was called a bit overzealous by the representative that Barron handed it to. Thomas Barron was a quality control and safety inspector for North American Aviation when it was the primary contractor to build the Apollo Command Module. He writes the 275-page scathing report, and 6 days after his testimony, Barron was killed instantly along with his wife and stepdaughter when a train crashed into their car near their home in Florida. And the punchline to the story, according to Jeranism, as I recall him telling it, is that the train was owned by NASA. It was a NASA train on NASA train tracks. So you blow the whistle on the fraud at NASA and you end up dead along with your wife and daughter.
I would almost wonder, the veracity of the entire thing. But yeah, it's telling, isn't it?
It is telling. And the other thing that's telling is, they ask us to buy some of the most preposterous things in the world. So we don't have to talk about the moon missions. Let's talk about something a little bit more current. How about that Rosetta spacecraft and Comet 67P? They tell us back on August 6th, 2014, the Rosetta spacecraft, which took 10 years to get to Comet 67P, hurtling through time and space at God knows how fast, it caught up with this comet, and then it deployed a Philae, I think is the name of this thing, the Philae lander.
Yeah.
Philae lander. It deployed the Philae lander. Now you got to, just imagine you're hurtling through space at, you could tell us how fast, I mean, tens and tens and thousands of miles per hour, and the communications are simultaneous. They can communicate with the lander.
Oh, that's one of the things that we use. So I've got a clip which came under heavy attack when I put it up to show we took imagery to show that it was a fraud. We took the whole story apart. But the main thing that's going on here is that you're told when they first got ready to do this, they built a camera that cost something like $100 million that had 1 megapixel. Not even kidding. That's what they took with them. And they cited that that was 10 years ago. So I looked up in the 90s, and you could already get professional cameras at 9 or 10 megapixels at that point. So they spent $100 million. They're going up to land on a comet with 1 megapixel or something like this. Their camera's named Osiris, and as we look into it, we realize that everything about the mission is named after the island Philae. The whole thing. There's an Isis temple there. You have to go look at my clip to see it all. But here's the point we made. We used their calculations to determine that it was well over 25 minutes one-way communication. And when you look at the speeds of everything, faster than speeding bullets, you know, and you're being asked to believe that somehow the lander communicates 25 minutes back. We answer the communication 25, so the better part of an hour, and they're landing on it. And of course, we predicted the outcome within a very short time of the supposed, and I quote, landing on the supposed, and I quote, comet. It doesn't get enough sun and it shuts down, which is always what they do when too many people are beginning to question their narrative. It's what China did when they supposedly went back to the moon. Too many people looking too hard up. We've got equipment failure, no more pictures, no more nothing. But the Philae mission, it's beyond the pale. And, you know, I go into great depth in the clip that I have up on YouTube on that. The head of a comet's called a coma. And I suggested to everyone, anyone buying this story is in fact in a coma and they're making fun of you. People should go look just to see the Egyptian throwback encoding alone, from all the things named on the supposed lander and the vehicle itself to a particular island in the Nile. It's stunning.
Well, the whole thing is stunning because once your eyes open, and again, Jeranism likes to say the spell is being broken, because once your eyes are open to these lies, you start to question everything.
Right.
And, you know, Hollywood, what is the song? It's The Final Frontier. Space is filmed in a
Red Hot Chili Peppers, 1990 something, end of the 90s. Space may be the final frontier, but it was made in a Hollywood
basement. That's
I actually
such a great
used that
line.
quote. Jason and I just put out a film called Shoot the Moon, which is on Vimeo on demand. And that was one of the quotes I included because it's so critically important. They told you the truth, didn't they?
Well, they were ahead of their time. They were way ahead of their time with that. And because I think back in that time, I was a fan of the Chili Peppers back in the day, big time fan. And I wasn't questioning any of the moon missions. I wasn't questioning the heliocentric model. I wasn't questioning any of the indoctrination that we've been presented with. And, you know, now we see these ceremonies. I forget the name of the tunnel, but we see these overtly occultic or satanic ceremonies for the celebrations of tunnels in Europe, where literally they have a 8-hour celebration with people dressed up like Baphomet dancing around. And it's just, the occult means hidden, but the occult practices of these evil people are no longer hidden, and their spells, the spells they've cast on us, are being broken. And I want to give a shout out to Dave Weiss, who I had on with my buddy Marty Leeds not too long ago. And he said this, and it reminds me of what you said about disproving the European Space Agency's Rosetta spacecraft nonsense. Dave Weiss said, "Our optics have outgrown their lies." I think it's really important.
Well, Dave has done a lot for myself and my channel, but what's fun, I think he commented, I used to always say when I would have an 8-inch robotic telescope in my backyard, and as they approached the Philae comet or Pluto or any number of things, where I basically took the imagery apart to show it wasn't a snapshot of anything. It was just an artistic construct. So I showed a picture of Jupiter that I took with an 8-inch telescope from my backyard. We are told, which I don't accept, but we are told it's something like 400 to 500 million miles away, when they were 7 million miles away by their standard to Pluto, with a camera identical in size to my 8-inch scope. They sent us this grainy, pixelated joke of an image. So I put my 500 million mile away image of Jupiter, and I asked a simple question. At what point does NASA's image need to be better than my no budget backyard images? And I think that might be what Dave Weiss was echoing back to.
Yeah, and basically he was saying that that's right. Our optics, our consumer available technology is now so good that we can see further than we've ever been able to see before. That includes zooming in on the moon or
Right.
taking measurements with distances, with infrared photography that we've not been able to measure in the past by seeing through ground atmosphere and things of that nature. Our optics have outgrown their lies. And I think it's going to be increasingly difficult for them to continue to have a spell on the global population, because once we can see their lies, we question everything, and then we wonder, why were they lying to us in the first place? Is it to cover up the fact that we were all put here by a creator? Is it to cover up the fact that the earth is a beautiful place and very unique in the universe, and it has a creator? Is that why they've done what they've done? Because at the end of the day, not only do they want to control humanity, many of them at the top of the pyramid are satanic and worship Lucifer, the fallen one.
Well, they're here. I can put this in a nice, neat little bow. I've been doing this for so long. Basically, what you have is a group of people who, by the way, are misusing occult. You know, occult just means hidden, but they're misusing. It's like a gun, man. You can go out and target shoot, or you can murder something. It just depends who's holding the gun. They're misusing what they're doing.
And can I just jump in and say, I just looked it up because I'd forgotten the name of that tunnel celebration, the occultic tunnel celebration in Europe. It was the Goddard Tunnel opening. Guys, I show footage from it in my video. The elite don't want you to know God is real. That's my interview with James Perloff. Go listen to that interview, because we cover a lot of it. In that interview, we cover the lies, the provable, quantifiable lies of Darwinism, which again, all leads to the same exact place. You are an accident. That's what they want you to believe. You were an aberration, an accident that happened by way of a big bang. God didn't speak the universe into being, like the Bible says. It's all just an accident, the result of a big bang, which is completely unprovable. Meanwhile, they have these satanic, Luciferian, occultic celebrations when they open the Goddard Tunnel in Europe. So, sorry, I just wanted to name that.
That's all right. And by the way, cymatics proves that sound and vibration create sound form.
That's right.
So in the book of John, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God. You know, these things are provably encoding very important ideas. Go look at cymatics, which is basically plates with frequencies fed into them and sand or something put on. That's how form is created. So when you see the opening to the book of John, you're being told a true thing.
100%. That's an excellent. I've used that exact same example in the past in a couple of videos or interviews. Spot on. That's the visual evidence of what we're talking about here, that there is a creator, folks.
Well, this is what's going on. So we have these people who have gone off the rails. Power corrupts, absolute power absolutely corrupts, and they cannot be God of this place, because this place is perfect from our point of view. And there's no human being that can make a system like this, right? So what they're doing is they're trying to replace the natural world with artificial things like artificial intelligence. And if they get to the point where everything is online, from your currency to cryptocurrency, everything is online, then in fact, in some bizarrely sick way, they will be gods of this artificial system. But you see, the natural system is still here, and they can't be gods of that. And the more you know about the natural system, the first things, like when you said about Darwinism or how this supposed place got here, the people who scrutinize that and see through the spell casting, the lies, and the illusion, the first thing that comes to mind is, how did we get here? None of these natural explanations work anymore. So then what? So someone had to create this place. That's the first place they go. And pretty quickly, they become more spiritual. And this is the antithesis of what the rulers would like to see, because they want us all sucked into their artificial dark technology world, trying to replace nature with all that. You know, look up in the sky, all those chemtrails going on, putting barium, strontium, aluminum into the skies. It's all part of the same game. And it's about control by very few people who, for lack of a better description, are just basically sick. Maybe they're not even describable as human beings anymore. To me, a human being has to have some compassion for living things. And it seems like these folks are bereft of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, Marty Leeds, when I had Marty and Dave Weiss on, Marty Leeds said something profound at the end, too, his final words. He said, if you want to know the truth, guys, you got to look at theology. You got to begin with theology because that's where they begin. So you can believe in God or don't believe in God, but you have to go to theology if you want to understand what's really going on in this world. And I think he's 100% right.
And it's not just our theology, it's all the big ones that have lasted the test of time. People put natural truths about our natural perfect world, however it got here, however you choose to accept it got here, and it's encoded in these things, everything, all these important ideas. And maybe not encoded is the best way to say it. Maybe a better way to say it is there's levels of meaning, and it's so carefully put together that if you're just a surface read, then that's for you. But if you're not, if you can go deeper than that, then there's more for you. If you can go deeper than that, it's like that. So it kind of, in a way, all these texts weed us out. Like if all you can handle is a surface reading and that's where you're at, well, then here it is. This is what's been provided for you. But there's much, much more. There used to be claims that every bit of religious scripture in this world that had made the test of time had at least 7 levels of meaning. And while I don't know for sure that's true, I do know certainly, I don't think I've read anything more in my life, and I read all the time, than versions of the Bible. I've read so many versions of the Bible. And now, it's come in handy. It's come in very, very handy in the kind of current age that we find ourselves. And you're right. It's all based on the misuse of these ideas. You can go back to like the supposed 1600s, and I have a problem with the timelines. And consider this, because you just mentioned Copernicus. So the Vatican's saying the world is flat, and here comes these guys, Copernicus, and then the suspiciously named Galileo Galilei. I guess he was instantly famous with a name like that. And the Vatican says, hey, Galileo, not so quick. You're going against scripture. We're going to kill you unless you shut your mouth. And then they said, well, we're not going to kill you, but we're going to jail you. And by the way, you can't publish. And then they said, well, you just got to stay in your house. And by the way, you can publish. In less than 100 years, the Jesuit order was teaching exactly what Galileo and Copernicus put forward, when the Vatican had in fact used Ptolemy, way back to Ptolemy, to try to get up to speed on their astronomy. So you can see what happens. We live in a world where there's basically 2 realities, the one for the masses and the one that's hidden. And it's a true thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And they retain their earthly power by continuing to cast the spells on humanity. And it makes you wonder if just about every damn thing we're taught is a lie. So as we round out this conversation, let's take one more left turn. Let's talk a little bit about SpaceX, Elon Musk, Virgin Galactic, Sir Richard Branson, and the commercialization of space travel. I would call attention to a great video, this one done again by my friend Marty Leeds. Marty Leeds Live is the YouTube channel. De-occulting Elon Musk. I posted it at thephaser.com when it came out. It's a must listen. It's just so fascinating. Marty's such a smart guy. Elon Musk has been made out to be some sort of modern day Iron Man.
He's been called Tony Stark. Yeah.
Tony Stark. And now we're starting to see some real chinks in Elon Musk's armor. But do you want to talk a little bit about SpaceX or Virgin Galactic and talk about the reality of what they're trying to sell us? What's real and what's not real?
It's all fake. It's all fake. And the proof is that space should be the most valuable high ground there is. Not only that, is the biggest unknown, according to what we're told. And yet, for some reason, our government just says, guess what? We're not doing space shuttles anymore. And by the way, if you want to go to space, you got to go over to our enemy's doorstep called Russia, that we convinced you were our enemies all through the 80s. So what they're doing is they're quickly shuffling NASA away, because they are a quasi-government agency, quasi-military. So theoretically, if the people got upset enough, they could take some recursive action against NASA. But it's like Monsanto. Bayer just bought Monsanto. So someday when someone's so sick of what Monsanto did to all the food supplies, there is no more Monsanto. That's what's going on with NASA. So they're turning it into spaces run by private corporation. The reason they're doing that is because you can't vote a private corporation out. You can't demand anything of a private corporation. And you can't take any recourse against them unless they break the rules of corporation. Then you can try to pierce the corporate veil, but even that's a joke. Can you imagine someone listening to this trying to go sue Google for some wrongdoing, it's a bit of a, it's laughable in the situation we find ourselves in. But, there's some rules of thumb anyone can use. You want to know who Elon Musk is? Look at his resume. One of the things you're going to find on there is actor. He's an actor, as was Stephen Hawking, as is Bill Nye, as is the director of the New York Planetarium. They're all actors. And I'll tell a little tale. I went to the Johnson Space Center in Houston with my nephew and one of my followers. And we went in there, and I was going to film it all because I had already for years been hot on the trail of all the nonsense. So here I show up at NASA Disneyland in Houston. And the first thing I lay my eyes on, and I'm not even kidding, is a mock-up of the Star Trek shuttle from the first episode or two called Galileo. And I turned on my camera, shot some pictures, and looked left at my nephew and right at the guy with me. And I said, if science is a serious endeavor, what place do these items of entertainment have being here? These are common sense observations. So, I mean, that's kind of what I can add here.
Yeah, that's actually powerful, and it reminds me of when my family and I were in Washington, D.C., and we went to, I think it was the Smithsonian, where they have a true life-size replica of the lunar lander. And you stand and you look at the thing, and I think, again, the spell being broken, when you look at how preposterous that thing
It's
is.
tinfoil.
It's just so preposterous. Like, there's nothing aerodynamic about it. There's nothing high-tech about it. It looks like it was built in somebody's backyard.
This was the Smithsonian?
I believe it was the Smithsonian. And
I can make it worse if you want. I'll make it worse for you. In the Aerospace Smithsonian, they're adding an 11-foot version of the original model of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. So right next to the Spirit of St. Louis is the USS Enterprise, which, by the way, the hull number on the Enterprise encodes 911 and 33. Clever, right?
Yeah, clever.
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence. And as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
Well, I mean, the bottom line on that lunar lander, and it brings me back to Bart Zabrell, is that honestly, it brings me back to the Chili Peppers. If space is the final frontier, it's made in the Hollywood basement. Is that the line?
Space may be the final frontier, which is taken from the show, and then they inform us all correctly, but it was made in a Hollywood basement. I don't think true. It's a bit like the Who song, Eminence Front. It's a put on. All these songs we grew up with are telling us true things.
Yeah, they sure are. And I'll tell you, for me, the smoking gun with the whole NASA Apollo story, if you believe it's not true, is the lunar rover. I mean, think about it. Look, if we were told, and it was Werner von Braun who put on his tombstone, Psalm 19:1? Is that it?
Yeah, so 911 is encoded there, and in some, I think it's 191. I forget. It's ones and nines. It's 911 encoded. It basically says that the handiwork of God is shown in the firmament. So I rest my case. So here's the man who made all the Saturn V, supposedly was responsible for all the high-end engineering that's never been outdone since, and he's telling me that there's a firmament, and that proves God's handiwork. Well, how did your rockets go to space then, Werner?
Yeah, well, and then what I was driving at as it relates to that, the lunar rover, is that I think it was Werner von Braun who originally said there's no way to go to the moon because the rockets we would have to build, they'd have to be 3-stage rockets as large as the Empire State Building. That's not what they built. The Saturn V rockets were far, far smaller than anything that large. And if you think about the concern for weight, if you think about the concern for trying to get 3 men to the moon safely, you'd have to take into account the weight. Of course, they would do that. And so it became so risk-free that they decided to bring a dune buggy. It literally makes no sense from aerodynamics, balance, weight, fuel. It makes zero sense. It makes literally zero sense.
People have shown that there's problems with how they supposedly stashed that buggy. But here's the thing for you. So we're told that the moon's roughly, it's over 250,000 miles by NASA standard. I think it's 340,000 or something like that. If I was to ask you, if I took a really bright white painted thing that was 40 miles in diameter and I took it 340,000 miles away from you think you could see it? I mean, it's a thought exercise, but here's the point. There's a crater called Aristarchus, which is often on the left-hand side of the moon, depending on where you are in its rotation during the night, that's listed as a naked eye object, which it is because I've spent a long time watching the moon, and it's roughly 45 miles in diameter. So what I did is I got in Google Earth and I went to Craters National Park to make a joke in my YouTube video, and I put a 45-mile diameter crater. Now, in Google Earth, you can only go up to 30 or 40,000 miles. That's all they'll allow, right? So the moon is another, 6 times beyond that. You can't see the crater I made when you go up that far from the world. So, it's among the other things we've said for a long time. The moon's a lot closer than you think, and that echoes back to one of your opening statements, where now they're marching it back. Oh, guess what? The moon's within our atmosphere. In another 20 years, the narrative's going to be the moon's a lot closer. It's a bit like the barn wall in Animal Farm, isn't it? Right? In Animal Farm, the animals can't remember what was written on the wall 4 years ago. So when they see the new stuff, they can't recall, is this what it always was? Well, that must be true then. That's how our world works. And Animal Farm is a key reference book for anyone who wants to know part of how this is all done.
That's exactly right. Well, Crrow, what a fascinating conversation. Why don't you shout out your radio show? And maybe what I can do too is link those YouTube videos you sent me. You guys have done mountains of hours of work. Do you want to tell people about that? And I'll link the videos below.
Sure. There's just a ton on YouTube, there's a ton of space work, and the first hours are free on Crrow777radio.com. If you become a member for the price of a cup of coffee, we do the full show. What basically happens is the second hour is a free speech zone because I own the server and everything else. In other words, YouTube can't censor me yet. On YouTube, I'm Crrow777, CRROW777, and we're up to episode 162, which is coming out this Thursday. But if you go back, way back, you'll see all the telescopic work I did, the first filming of the lunar wave. If you come in front of all the telescopic work, down in the 70s, I think there's a 12-hour run at Space Fraud. And actually, it's only 6 hours because it's the first hour only. So there's all that, man.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate what you're doing. You're a voice for truth, and people don't have to agree with anything you say or everything you say, but certainly the things you say are thought-provoking. And in a time of practically universal deceit and lies, that's what we need. We need thought-provoking conversations and conversations that are threatening to the establishment. I mean, I'm sure that this will be demonetized, and that's fine because it doesn't matter. We're not going to let them demoralize us, guys. We're going to keep at it, stay in the fight. So a special thanks to my patrons who are helping us do just that. And a special thanks to Crrow for all your time today. Thanks, man.
Hey, man, as we go out, I'll tell you the difference between what I'm doing and what mainstream. Don't accept anything I've said here. Challenge it. But anyhow, thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. We'll do it again. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And if this conversation had any merit for you or you found it moving in any way, do share it. Give it a like. That'll help us out. And then share the link to this video within your sphere of influence on social media. And for real news 24/7, guys, you can always find us and all of my latest videos at the very top of sgtreport.com. Thanks for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.
But should she lose, we'll have an insurance policy and we'll get this guy out of office. And that's what they said, and that's what they meant. That's treason.